Hello everyone, today I'll be sharing with you guys my tips for your Cambridge interview. Now, I applied to the University of Cambridge for law, so most of my tips are coming from that subject area, but don't worry, I think you can apply them to any subject area. Now, my first tip is to read through the structure of the course and read through it very carefully. Make sure that you understand what the different modules of that course are, in what kind of parts is it divided, so that when they ask you about your motivation to study the course, you can really give them a very specific answer and tell them these are the things I'm interested in. That shows them that you have really researched that 3 or 4 year degree that you're signing up for. Because you don't want to sound like a person who's just like, yeah, you know, I want to be there for 3 years, although I don't really know what I'm gonna do for these 3 years, because that would be kind of weird. Now, tip number 2 is to watch a sample interview. At best, watch that sample interview for your subject area. If there is no sample interview for your subject area, it can still help to watch sample interviews from other subject areas, because it just gives you an idea of the setting and what kind of questions are asked, and you know how they may ask back when you give an answer and stuff like that, and it just calms your nerves down. Now, there is a sample interview for law. I'm going to link it in the description box below. It was posted by the University of Cambridge, so it's an official source, and it is by no means a perfect example. Like, they don't tell you if that interview was really good or really bad, but to me it just helped knowing what kind of questions are going to come, what is the setting going to be like, and what I should prepare for. Now, also don't forget that there can be a written test to your admissions process. For law, there is a written test at Cambridge, and there is a sample of that written test uploaded by the University of Cambridge. I'm going to link that in the description box below as well. Now, of course, you're not going to get the same questions as in that sample test, but you get an idea of what kind of questions are asked. How could you structure your answers to those questions, and how much time should you allocate to each part of the essay when answering the question. You can also ask your university guidance counselor to mark a mock answer to the practice test, but of course they also don't know the specific marking criteria, so you know, you can try that, but I'm not sure how effective it's going to be at the end of the day. But they can still give you really good feedback on your structure and how clear you are in your answer. Now, my third tip, and this is probably the most important one, read up on your subject. You should really know what you want to study, and you know, you should have a bit of an insight into that. Now, they don't expect you to be an expert, because you're going to university to become an expert in your subject, but they want to see that you're interested in the subject. So read some books, read some journals related to your subject. Now, I was mainly interested in international public law, so I read books and journals related to that. If you guys want to know my personal statement where I wrote about that interest, you can hit the info button above and it's going to take you to that video. Now, I have a few samples of the kind of books I read to give you guys an idea of, you know, what you could read and how you could prepare. So, here's this book, and this is German. I apologize, this is the only German book, the others are English. And this one's about the Nuremberg laws. So I wrote about the Nuremberg laws in my personal statement, so it was a good idea to, you know, just get a little bit of a background. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't read this entire book. Like, no. I skimmed the introduction. I think I read through like a few pages in one chapter, and that was it. Then I also read a little bit of Introduction to International Relations. Now, I also was a global politics student, so I already had a pretty good idea about like relations between states. But for international public law, politics is important. So you don't want to be this person who doesn't really know how intergovernmental organizations work, or how relations between states can affect their commitment to international law, because those are pretty basic things that, you know, an easy school book can teach you. And then I also had a really big book, Genocide and International Law. Now, the reason why I picked a book on genocide is because I did a course at Stanford Summer School called Genocide and Humanitarian Intervention, and I wrote about it in my personal statement. So they had a good reason to expect me to know quite a bit on genocide and international law. So I wanted to make sure that I'm an expert on that, because they could have asked me about it. And now, I didn't read this entire book, okay? Once again, I read through the introduction, and then I read through one chapter which was about the definition of genocide, because that's a pretty important point regarding genocide law. But the rest, you know, I didn't read it, because you can't manage to read like 100 journals before your interview. You just don't get notified early enough for your interview. So, you know, you can't really do that. So make sure that, you know, you read a lot, but you're smart about how you read it. Because very often you can get the main point of a reading from the introduction or the abstract, and that's enough. So I would highly recommend, you know, being smart about that, because reading like 500 pages books, it's nice, but you know, it's not necessarily going to help you. At the end of the day, your interview is only 20 minutes long, so you won't have time to recite the entire book anyway. Now, make sure that your readings relate to your personal statement, because they will probably ask questions about the specific aspect of the course that you are interested in according to your personal statement. So make sure you know that part and that you know what you said in your personal statement. Now, when you've done all those readings and now you're an expert on the thing, then record yourself answering some questions. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, think about what questions they could come up with based on the sample interview you watched, and then answer them and just record yourself with your phone. Why? Because then you hear how you sound when you answer a question. So, do you sound coherent? Is your answer formulated well? Is it clear what you are trying to say? Do you explain your thought process well? Because they really want to know how you think. They want to see the different steps you make when thinking through a problem. So listen to your answer and think about it. Do I show that to them? Do they really understand how I came to that conclusion, or is that not clear? Because if it's not, try to answer it again, and answer it again and again until you start answering questions in a way where it's very clear for the person which steps you made in your thought process, how you arrived to your conclusion, and how you justify your conclusion. And if you hit those points, then it will be really easy for your interviewers to understand what you're trying to bring across, and you will seem very articulate, which is always good. Now, my last tip is to do a sample interview with your university guidance counselor. Now, university guidance counselors have a lot of experience with people applying to Oxbridge, and they often also have sample material of the questions asked in interviews and the tests. So they can really help you also evaluate how good you are at answering questions when you're in front of somebody rather than just recording yourself. And you know, they can also give you tips on how to prepare a little bit more if you lack in a specific area. So I would highly recommend reaching out to your university guidance counselor and asking them for help. I know my university guidance counselor did a sample interview for me, and it was super helpful. Like, her sample interview was a lot harder than my actual interview, but that just helped because then I did the actual interview and it was just so much less scary than it would have been without the sample interview. So yeah, those are all my tips for a successful interview at the University of Cambridge. If you guys have any questions about my application to Cambridge, feel free to drop them in the comments below or send me a message through the contact section of my blog, which is linked below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye!